shattered mirrors. The rain hammered against the windows of Meridian Memorial Hospital like an angry visitor demanding entry. Dr. Nathaniel Walsh pulled his coat tighter as he stepped out into the deluge, the weight of a 14-hour surgery still heavy on his shoulders. The hospital's illuminated sign cast a blue glow across the parking lot, reflecting in puddles that had formed like small lakes across the asphalt. As founder and chief surgeon of the country's most prestigious cardiac center, Nathaniel had everything money could buy. His name graced medical journals and charity galas alike. His innovations in pediatric cardiac surgery had saved thousands. Yet tonight, like most nights, he was heading home to an empty penthouse where the only sound would be the echo of his own footsteps. 3 years. That's how long it had been since Olivia walked out of his life. 3 years since their marriage crumbled under the weight of his ambition and her disillusionment. 3 years of wondering if he'd made the greatest mistake of his life by choosing his career over her ultimatum. He was halfway to his car when he heard it. A small, frightened sob coming from beneath the awning of the hospital's east entrance. Nathaniel turned, squinting through the rain. There, huddled against the wall, was a small boy no older than 5 or 6, soaked to the bone and clutching what appeared to be a tattered stuffed rabbit. "Hey there," Nathaniel called, approaching slowly. "Are you lost?" The child didn't respond, only clutched his stuffed animal tighter and tried to make himself smaller. Nathaniel crouched down, keeping a respectful distance. "It's okay. I'm a doctor. My name is Dr. Walsh. I work here at the hospital." He gestured to the building behind them. "Can you tell me your name?" The boy remained silent, trembling from cold and fear. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead and his blue dinosaur t-shirt was soaked through. "Let's get you inside where it's warm, okay? Then we can figure out how to find your parents." After a moment's hesitation, the boy nodded. Nathaniel carefully removed his coat and draped it over the child's shoulders. It engulfed him completely, but at least it was dry. He guided the boy back into the hospital, where the warmth enveloped them immediately. Nurse Josephine Rodriguez looked up from the reception desk, her eyebrows shooting upward. "Dr. Walsh?" "What's going on?" "Found him outside in the rain," Nathaniel explained. "Can we get some dry clothes from pediatrics and maybe some hot chocolate?" Within minutes, they had the boy situated in the staff lounge. Wrapped in a hospital blanket with dry clothes and sipping hot chocolate, he looked marginally better, though his eyes remained wary. "Can you tell me your name now?" Nathaniel asked gently. The boy hesitated, then whispered, "Thomas." "Nice to meet you, Thomas. Can you tell me how you ended up outside our hospital tonight?" "I was with my mom," the child said softly. "She had to come here for medicine. I wanted to wait in the car, but then I saw a puppy and followed it. And then I couldn't find our car anymore." "What's your mom's name?" "We can page her." Thomas looked down at his hot chocolate. "Mommy says I'm not supposed to talk to strangers about her." Nathaniel frowned. "That was an odd instruction." "Well, we need to find her. She must be worried sick about you." It was then that Thomas finally looked up, meeting Nathaniel's gaze fully for the first time. The mug of hot chocolate clattered to the floor, splashing across the tile, but Nathaniel barely noticed. Those eyes, hazel with flecks of amber, unusual enough to be distinctive, unmistakable, Olivia's eyes. Nathaniel staggered back slightly, his mind reeling. The boy's age, the timing of Olivia's departure, the secretiveness, it all clicked into place with devastating clarity. "Thomas," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What's your last name?" The boy answered with innocent simplicity, "Sinclair Walsh. Mommy says the Walsh part is from my daddy who fixes hearts." Whispers of yesterday, the hospital corridor seemed to stretch endlessly as Nathaniel guided Thomas toward his private office. His mind raced with calculations he couldn't believe he was making. If Thomas was indeed his son, and those unmistakable eyes left little doubt, the boy would have been conceived shortly before Olivia disappeared from his life. "A son he never knew existed, Dr. Walsh?" Josephine called after him. "Should I contact social services about the boy?" "No," Nathaniel replied too quickly, then composed himself. "I mean, not yet. I believe I know his mother. Let me make some calls first." Inside his office, Nathaniel settled Thomas on the leather sofa while he searched through the bottom drawer of his desk. After a moment, he pulled out a framed photograph he'd hidden away 3 years ago, a painful reminder he couldn't bear to see but couldn't bring himself to discard. It showed Nathaniel and Olivia on their honeymoon in Santorini, her laugh captured mid-moment as the Mediterranean breeze tossed her chestnut hair. "Thomas," he said softly, kneeling before the boy. "Is this your mommy?" The child's face brightened instantly. "That's her. Where did you get a picture of mommy? Do you know where she is?" Nathaniel's throat tightened. "We're old friends. Can you tell me anything about your daddy?" Thomas's expression grew serious, reciting what was clearly a memorized response. "Mommy says my daddy is a very important doctor who saves people with special hearts. She says I have his hands and her eyes." He held up his small hands as if for inspection, then added proudly, "I'm going to be a doctor too, just like him." Every word felt like a physical blow to Nathaniel's chest. He remembered Olivia's final words during their last argument. "You've built an empire, Nathaniel, but you've left no room in it for us." He'd dismissed her concerns, too consumed with expanding his medical network, securing his legacy. The irony was unbearable. His legacy had been growing up without him all this time. "Thomas, I'm going to try to reach your mom. Can you stay here and watch some cartoons?" He turned on the small television in the corner of his office, finding a children's channel. In the hallway, Nathaniel leaned against the wall, trying to steady his breathing. He pulled out his phone and, after a moment's hesitation, dialed a number he hadn't called in years but still knew by heart. The call went straight to voicemail. Hearing Olivia's voice after so long sent a shiver through him. "This is Olivia Sinclair." "I can't come to the phone right now." He tried again with the same result, then sent a text. "Olivia, it's Nathaniel. Thomas is safe with me at Meridian Memorial. Please call immediately." While waiting, Nathaniel called his head of security, Benedict Harrison. "Ben, I need a favor. Check our hospital records for any patient named Olivia Sinclair who might have come in today. It's urgent." 15 minutes later, Benedict returned with an answer. "Dr. Walsh and Olivia. Sinclair was prescribed medication for chronic migraines at our outpatient pharmacy at approximately 6:30 p.m. Security footage shows her returning to the parking garage frantically about an hour later, appearing distressed." "She's looking for Thomas," Nathaniel murmured. "Alert all hospital staff and security to keep an eye out for her. If she's found, bring her directly to my office." Returning to his office, Nathaniel found Thomas had fallen asleep on the sofa, exhaustion finally claiming the small boy. Gently, he covered him with a blanket, then stood watching him with a mixture of wonder and regret. The boy's features were a perfect blend, Olivia's eyes, but Nathaniel's strong jawline already showing in miniature. Thomas's hands were indeed like his own, with long fingers that surgeons envied. Had Olivia seen those similarities every day, reminders of the man who had failed her so completely? He remembered the night before Olivia left. She'd been unusually quiet at dinner, watching him with an intensity he'd been too preoccupied to question. Had she been deciding whether to tell him about the pregnancy? Had she been giving him one last chance to show that he could make room in his life for a family? Nathaniel sank into his chair, memories washing over him like the rain outside. Their whirlwind romance during his surgical fellowship, the simple wedding against his family's wishes, her unwavering support as he built his medical empire from nothing. While he'd been focused on conquering the medical world, she'd been dreaming of the family they'd planned together. Dreams he kept postponing until the time was right. The hospital intercom crackled to life. "Dr. Walsh to the main entrance. Dr. Nathaniel Walsh to the main entrance, please." His heart leaped. He looked at Thomas, still peacefully sleeping, then quickly scribbled a note for Josephine, who he asked to come watch over the boy. As he rushed toward the main entrance, Nathaniel realized he had no idea what he would say to the woman who had once been his everything, the woman who had raised his son without him. The storm outside had intensified, but nothing could match the tempest of emotions raging within him as he approached the hospital lobby. And there she was, soaked from the rain, her face pale with worry, those unmistakable hazel eyes wild with fear as she demanded information from the front desk staff. "Olivia," he said, his voice barely audible. She turned and time seemed to stand still between them. 3 years of silence collapsed into a single breathless moment. Rainfall reunion, Nathaniel. Olivia's voice was barely a whisper, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment she stood frozen, rainwater dripping from her coat onto the polished hospital floor. Then, recovering herself, "Where is my son?" "My son, not our son." The distinction wasn't lost on Nathaniel. "He's safe," Nathaniel assured her, keeping his voice steady despite the hurricane of emotions swirling within him. "He's sleeping in my office. I found him outside in the rain." Relief washed over her face, immediately followed by wariness. Her chestnut hair was darker when wet, her face thinner than he remembered. But those eyes, Thomas's eyes, were exactly as they had been the day she walked away. "Take me to him," she demanded, no room for negotiation in her tone. They walked in tense silence through the corridors of the hospital that bore his name. Staff members glanced curiously at them. Dr. Walsh, the legendary surgeon whose personal life was as private as it was supposedly empty, walking alongside a woman who looked at him with a complex mixture of gratitude and resentment. When they reached his office, Josephine tactfully excused herself. Thomas was still asleep on the sofa, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. Olivia rushed to him, kneeling beside the couch, her fingers gently brushing his hair from his forehead. "He found his way to you," she murmured, almost to herself. "Of all the places in this city, why didn't you tell me?" Nathaniel asked, the question that had been burning inside him since he first looked into Thomas's eyes. Olivia didn't answer immediately. She continued stroking their son's hair, her back to Nathaniel, gathering her thoughts or perhaps her courage. "I was going to," she finally said, turning to face him. "The night we had that final argument about your family's gala. I was 3 weeks pregnant, and I had it all planned, a special dinner, a gift box with baby shoes. But then you told me you'd committed us to a 6-month overseas tour of your new international hospitals." She shook her head at the memory. "You hadn't even asked me, Nathaniel. You just decided that our lives, my life, was something you could schedule around your ambitions." Nathaniel remembered that night with painful clarity. He'd been so excited about expanding his medical network globally, so certain Olivia would share his enthusiasm. Instead, she'd grown increasingly distant as he outlined their itinerary across 3 continents. "You could have told me then," he said. "If I'd known—" "What?" Olivia challenged. "You would have postponed your grand plans? Changed who you fundamentally were. I didn't want our child to be another obligation you squeezed between board meetings and surgeries." Her voice softened. "And I didn't want to be the woman who trapped you with a baby when it was clear you weren't ready for one." "So you just disappeared," Nathaniel said, the hurt evident in his voice. "Changed your number, moved away. Not even a letter, Olivia." She looked down. "I went to my sister's in Seattle. I needed space to figure out what kind of life I could give our child. By the time Thomas was born, I'd convinced myself you were better off continuing your brilliant career unencumbered." She met his eyes again. "You were changing the world, Nathaniel. Saving lives. Who was I to stand in the way of that?" The irony of her words struck him like a physical blow. For 3 years, he'd thrown himself even more completely into his work, expanding his hospital network, pioneering new surgical techniques, all while feeling increasingly hollow inside. Success had never tasted so empty, and now, he asked, glancing at Thomas, "You're back in Philadelphia. Why?" "My father's illness," she admitted. "We moved back 6 months ago to be close to him in his final days. I've been careful to stay away from your hospitals, your charity events. Today was an emergency. My migraine medication ran out, and Meridian Memorial's pharmacy was the only one open late enough." She gave a humorless laugh. "I never thought—" Thomas stirred then, his eyes fluttering open. Upon seeing his mother, he broke into a wide smile. "Mommy, I found Dr. Walsh. He knows you from the picture." Olivia gathered him into her arms. "I see that, sweetheart. You gave me quite a scare." Thomas looked between the 2 adults, his young mind making connections. "Mommy, is Dr. Walsh a friend of Daddy's?" "Because they both fix hearts." The question hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Nathaniel held his breath. waiting for Olivia's response. She met his gaze over their son's head, something unreadable in her expression. "Thomas," she said carefully, "Dr. Walsh is very special, and we need to have a grown-up talk with him." Rain continued to beat against the windows, the storm outside a fitting backdrop to the emotional tempest within. As Thomas nestled against his mother, Nathaniel realized that everything he thought he'd built, his medical empire, his reputation, his carefully controlled life, was nothing compared to what he'd lost, and perhaps what he might still have a chance to reclaim. Healing Heart's dawn broke over Philadelphia, pale light filtering through the blinds of Nathaniel's office, where an uncomfortable night had been spent on leather furniture never meant for sleeping. Thomas had eventually dozed off again on the sofa, while Olivia reluctantly accepted the reclining chair. Nathaniel had insisted they stay rather than venture back out into the storm, taking the office floor for himself with a spare hospital blanket. Now, watching the first golden rays illuminate Olivia's sleeping face, Nathaniel was struck by how the years had changed her. There were fine lines around her eyes that hadn't been there before, marks of laughter, worry, and the countless expressions a mother makes raising a child alone. Her hands, once adorned with the jewelry he'd given her, now bore only a simple silver band on her right hand. Her grandmother's ring. He remembered. Thomas stirred first, his small face scrunching before his eyes opened. He looked momentarily confused, then spotted Nathaniel. "Are you really a doctor who fixes hearts?" he asked with childlike directness. Nathaniel moved closer, keeping his voice low to let Olivia sleep. "I am. I help people when their hearts aren't working properly." Thomas seemed to consider this seriously. "My friend Peter had heart surgery when he was a baby. He has a scar." The boy traced a line down the center of his own chest. "That's right." Nathaniel nodded, impressed by the child's knowledge. "That's called open-heart surgery. Do you do that kind of surgery?" "I do. It's my specialty, especially for children." Thomas's eyes widened. "Just like my daddy. Mommy says he's the best heart doctor ever." Nathaniel felt his own heart constrict at the words. The best heart doctor who couldn't heal his own broken relationship. The irony wasn't lost on him. Olivia woke then, instantly alert in the way of mothers accustomed to responding to their children's needs. Her eyes found Thomas first, then darted to Nathaniel with a mixture of wariness and resignation. "Good morning," Nathaniel said softly. After getting Thomas settled with breakfast in the hospital cafeteria under Josephine's watchful eye, Olivia and Nathaniel retreated to a small courtyard at the center of the hospital. The storm had passed, leaving behind a freshly washed world and the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil. "He's remarkable," Nathaniel said, breaking the silence between them. "Intelligent? Observant? Kind?" "He is," Olivia agreed, a small smile of maternal pride crossing her face. "He started reading at 3. His teachers say he's gifted." "Like his mother," she shook her head, "and stubborn like his father. Once he sets his mind to something, there's no changing it." The casual acknowledgement of his paternity hung in the air between them. "Olivia," Nathaniel began carefully, "I understand why you left. I wasn't the husband you deserved. I was obsessed with building something that would last, something meaningful. And you couldn't see that we could have been that something," she finished for him. It wasn't said with bitterness, just as a statement of fact. "No, I couldn't," he admitted, "not until it was too late. But Thomas deserves to know his father, and I—" He hesitated, then forged ahead. "I deserve a chance to be the father he needs, the father I want to be." Olivia studied him, searching his face for something. "You've changed," she observed. "Not enough, probably," he acknowledged. "I still work too much. I still believe in what I do, but losing you taught me that success means nothing without someone to share it with. And now there's Thomas," she said quietly. "Now there's Thomas," he agreed. "But there's also still you, Olivia. There's always been you." She looked away, toward the flowering dogwood at the center of the courtyard. "I'm not the same woman who left, Nathaniel. Motherhood changes you. Struggling financially changes you." "Financially?" he echoed, surprised. "But the divorce settlement—" "I never filed the papers," Olivia admitted, meeting his stunned gaze. Legally, we're still married. I couldn't bring myself to make it final, and then when I discovered the pregnancy, she shrugged. It seemed simpler to just disappear. So you've been raising our son on a teacher's salary, Nathaniel said, pieces falling into place. Olivia had been working on her teaching credential when they separated. Elementary school art teacher, she confirmed with a hint of pride. I finished my degree in Seattle. We've done fine. Thomas has everything he needs, but not everything he deserves, Nathaniel said softly. Not his father. Olivia's expression hardened slightly. He has needed for nothing, especially not a father who might have seen him as an inconvenience. The accusation stung, but Nathaniel recognized the protective instinct behind it. You're right to doubt me, he conceded. I've given you every reason to, but I'm asking for a chance, Olivia. Not to pick up where we left off, we're different people now, but to build something new, for Thomas. And what does that look like to you? She asked skeptically. Honestly? I don't know, Nathaniel admitted. I've never been a father before, but I want to learn. Weekend visits, school events, teaching him to ride a bike, helping with homework, all of it. For the first time, Olivia's expression softened with something like hope. You'd really show up for school plays and parent-teacher conferences? The great Dr. Walsh sitting on tiny chairs with other parents? Front row, he promised, a smile tugging at his lips. With flowers for the art teacher. A ghost of a smile crossed her face before fading. We can't rush this, Nathaniel. Thomas needs stability. He needs to understand who you are first before we upend his world. I agree, Nathaniel said, surprising her. We take it slowly. Start with the truth, a child-appropriate version. That his father has been away helping sick children, but now he's back and wants very much to be part of Thomas's life. Olivia considered this, then nodded slowly. That could work. But Nathaniel, her voice grew serious again. I need to know this isn't temporary. That when the novelty wears off or when the hospital board needs you in Tokyo for a month, you won't just disappear, he finished when she couldn't. Like you did? The words hung between them, neither an accusation nor a defense, simply an acknowledgement of their shared past failures. I can't promise I'll be perfect, Nathaniel said finally, but I can promise I'll try every day to be better than I was yesterday. For Thomas, and maybe someday for us. Olivia didn't respond immediately. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small, worn notebook. She opened it to reveal a collection of newspaper clippings, articles about Nathaniel's medical breakthroughs, hospital expansions, charity galas. I saved these for him, she said quietly, so he would know who his father was, what you were accomplishing. I never wanted him to think you were someone worth forgetting. Nathaniel felt his throat tighten as he looked at the carefully preserved record of his professional life, a life that had felt increasingly meaningless without them in it. Thank you, he whispered, overwhelmed by the gesture, for keeping me alive in his world. We should get back to him, Olivia said, closing the notebook. He'll be wondering where we are. As they walked back toward the hospital, she added softly, almost to herself, He has your smile, you know. When he's truly happy, it's like looking at you. It was the first time she had voluntarily acknowledged the connection between them, a tentative bridge across the chasm of their separation. Nathaniel didn't respond, but as they entered the cafeteria where Thomas sat chatting animatedly with Josephine, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, the fragile, terrifying beginnings of hope. New Horizons. 6 months later, the Walsh family home on Chestnut Hill was alive with activity. What had once been a pristinely decorated showpiece, featured in architectural magazines but rarely actually lived in, was now marked by evidence of a child. Toys strategically stored in decorative baskets, a child-sized easel in the corner of the sunroom, magnets holding artwork on the refrigerator. Nathaniel adjusted his tie, glancing at his watch. The hospital charity gala would begin in an hour, and for the first time in years, he wasn't the sole focus of the event. Instead, he had insisted on highlighting the hospital's expanded pediatric care unit, with special recognition for the Teaching Artists program, a new initiative bringing art therapy to long-term pediatric patients, headed by Olivia. Need help with that? Olivia appeared in the doorway of his dressing room, already elegant in a midnight blue gown, her chestnut hair swept up in a sophisticated updo. Please, he admitted, his fingers fumbling with the bow tie. I never did get the hang of these things. She stepped forward, the subtle scent of her perfume, the same one she'd worn on their wedding day, enveloping him as her deft fingers fixed his tie. The familiar intimacy of the gesture wasn't lost on either of them. There, she said, smoothing his collar. Presentable enough to introduce the remarkable Olivia Sinclair Walsh and her groundbreaking program. Nothing less would do, he replied with a smile. Is Thomas ready? As ready as a 6-year-old can be for a black tie event. Grandmother Patricia has him thoroughly distracted with stories of your childhood mishaps. Nathaniel groaned. I should never have introduced them. She'll turn him against me with tales of my misspent youth. On the contrary, Olivia laughed. I think she's rather impressed that you survived setting fire to the garage and still became a surgeon. The mention of his mother brought a reflective look to Nathaniel's face. Patricia Walsh, the formidable matriarch of the Walsh family, had been initially stunned by the revelation of her grandson's existence. But Thomas had won her over within minutes of their first meeting, his precocious questions and earnest nature breaking through decades of aristocratic reserve. The past 6 months had been a careful dance of rebuilding. True to their agreement, they had started slowly. First, supervised visits where Nathaniel joined them for outings to the zoo or science museum. Then weekends at his home, a guest room transformed into Thomas's space with Olivia staying in another room down the hall. Family dinners where they learned to be comfortable together again. Not as husband and wife, but as co-parents, finding their way. Through it all, Thomas had shown a resilience and openness that humbled both of them. He'd accepted the edited version of their story with a child's practicality. So you're my daddy, and you fix hearts, and now you're not going to be away anymore? When Nathaniel confirmed this, Thomas had simply nodded and asked if that meant he could have a dog now since they had a big yard. The Walsh family golden retriever, Apollo, had arrived the following weekend. I've been thinking, Nathaniel said now as Olivia adjusted her earrings in the mirror beside him, about cutting back my surgical schedule. She paused, meeting his eyes in the reflection. Why would you do that? You love surgery. I do, he agreed. But I've realized I love being a father more. And he hesitated, then pressed on. I think I could love being a husband again, if given the chance. Olivia turned to face him directly, her expression carefully neutral. Nathaniel, I'm not proposing, he clarified quickly. Not yet. We're not ready, but I want you to know that's where I hope we're heading, where I want us to head, when you're ready. She studied him for a long moment. You really have changed. Not completely, he admitted with a rueful smile. I still work too hard. I still believe in what I do. But I've learned there's room in my life for more than just medicine. You and Thomas taught me that. Olivia reached up, her fingers gently touching his cheek. The old Nathaniel wouldn't have recognized that. The old Nathaniel was a fool, he said simply. Before she could respond, they were interrupted by the patter of small feet as Thomas burst into the room. Resplendent in his child-sized tuxedo, his hair slicked back in imitation of his father's. Grandma says it's time to go. She says punctuality is a Walsh family value, whatever that means. Nathaniel and Olivia exchanged amused glances. She's absolutely right, Nathaniel agreed, kneeling to straighten Thomas's bow tie. How do you feel about your first big hospital event? Thomas considered this seriously. Will there be cake? The best cake in Philadelphia, Nathaniel promised. Then I feel good about it, Thomas declared. And Mommy says I can show my art to the sick kids tomorrow. That's right, Olivia confirmed. The first official artwork for the new pediatric wing. Thomas beamed with pride, then looked between them with a child's perceptiveness. Are you two having a grown-up moment? Grandma says you need those sometimes? Nathaniel laughed. Your grandmother is a wise woman. Yes, we were having a grown-up moment. About getting back together? Thomas asked hopefully. Because Joey at school says when his parents got divorced, they hated each other forever. But you two don't hate each other, right? Olivia knelt beside Nathaniel, both of them now at eye level with their son. We definitely don't hate each other, she assured him. In fact, it's quite the opposite. Thomas looked pleased. Good, because I think we should all live together always. It's better this way. With that simple declaration, he dashed back out of the room, calling for his grandmother and Apollo. Alone again, Nathaniel and Olivia remained kneeling, face to face, the weight of their son's words hanging between them. Out of the mouths of babes, Nathaniel said softly. Olivia smiled, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. Those remarkable hazel eyes that had drawn him to her the first time they met. The same eyes he'd recognized in their son on a rainy night that now seemed like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. We should go, she said, rising to her feet. Your mother is right about punctuality. Nathaniel nodded, standing and offering her his arm. Mrs. Sinclair Walsh, would you do me the honor of accompanying me to this gala? She hesitated only briefly before sliding her hand into the crook of his elbow. I would, Dr. Walsh. As they descended the stairs to join Thomas and Patricia in the foyer, Nathaniel felt a sense of rightness that had eluded him for years. His career remained important. The work he did saved lives. But he understood now what Olivia had tried to tell him years ago. A legacy wasn't just about the mark you left on the world, but about the people you chose to share that world with. Outside, a light rain had begun to fall. Not the violent storm of their reunion, but a gentle spring shower that promised new growth. Thomas pressed his face to the window of the car as they drove toward the city, watching raindrops race down the glass. I'm glad I got lost in the rain, he announced suddenly. Why is that? Olivia asked. Thomas looked at them both with the simple wisdom of childhood. Because it helped us find each other again. Nathaniel reached across the seat, his fingers finding Olivia's in the darkness. To his surprise and joy, she didn't pull away. Outside the window, Philadelphia's skyline came into view, the lights of Meridian Memorial Hospital visible among the skyscrapers. It stood as a monument to Nathaniel's past ambitions, but as he sat with his son and the woman he'd never stopped loving, he realized it was no longer the heart of his empire. That heart was right here, in this car, holding his hand despite the storms they'd weathered. And this time, he wasn't letting go.